Buenos días, desde el hermoso estado de Oaxaca. Hey. Aquí estoy con mi novia, Yasmin. And today we want to talk about Spanish that you should know and that you should learn if you're going to come here to Oaxaca. So first we're going to take a look at some basic Spanish first. Things like hola, buenos días, things like that. And then we're going to take a look at some more local words that you would hear in Oaxaca. Something like the word tequio, which we'll take a look at the end of the video. Also, if you're interested in learning Spanish and you'd like to join my free course, check out my website, SpanishWithNate.com. Also, check out these authentic, I think they're Prada glasses that I bought for 100 pesos. Can you believe it? $5, authentic. Anyways, so let's take a look. So first we're gonna take a look at some basic phrases. We'll look at how to order food and things like that. So first off, of course, we have hola, which what does that mean?
Hello?
Exactly, we have hola. Of course, we have ¿Cómo estás? How are you? If you want to speak formally, you would just say ¿Cómo está? Next, it's very common here in Mexico that when greeting someone, you won't say hola, ¿cómo estás? You can say that, but it's very normal to say something like buenos días. So if it's the morning, like it is right now, we'd say buenos días, or you could say buenas tardes, or buenas noches. So one of those three. Next, we have mucho gusto, which should just be nice to meet you. And that literally means much pleasure. Mucho gusto. Much pleasure. You can also say es un gusto as well. Next we have con permiso, which would be excuse me. Kind of like when you're asking someone, we need to get by, con permiso, excuse me. This is a pretty beautiful Spanish lesson, is it not? Next we have the word perdón, which can mean like excuse me, perdón, like asking someone, hey, perdón. But it can also mean like, excuse me, like, I'm sorry, perdón.
Algo muy importante que tienen que decir en caso de cometan algo, por favor, please, gracias, thank you, y de nada, you're welcome.
That's right.
Lo apreciamos mucho.
Yeah. Okay, now for getting around. Okay, this is really important. So if you need to get around, there's a lot of good food here in Oaxaca. In fact, Oaxaca is known as the food capital of all of Mexico. So let's say you want to know how to get to the market. You could say something like, ¿Dónde está el mercado? ¿Dónde está el mercado? Next, if you want to go to the city center, you can say something like La Plaza or El Zócalo. ¿Dónde está la plaza? Or ¿Dónde está el Zócalo? Zócalo is just like the city center. A very important word you need to know here in Oaxaca, especially if you're on the coast, is La Playa. La Playa, meaning the beach. We also have the word la calle, meaning the street. Okay, another really important thing you need to know in Spanish is this idea of ir plus a plus the infinitive. So all that means is just, it's a really simple way to speak in the future. So for example, we would say voy a comer, I'm going to eat. So that's really important. So, voy a bailar, voy a escuchar música. Things like that. Okay, now let's talk about how to order food. Let's say I want to order food. What would I say? What is the most common thing we would say here?
Me da.
Exactly. Me da. Oftentimes Spanish learners will say something like puedo tener or quisiera.
Quisiera.
I always use me da or me das. Now, me das would be the little more informal, whereas me da is a little bit more formal. But that's the way to order food. So you say me da, and then whatever you want. So this could be unos tacos or anything like that. Me da. Okay, now something really important you should know how to say it here in Oaxaca is quiero una tlayuda, por favor. Quiero una tlayuda. Okay, so una tlayuda here in Oaxaca is basically just a typical dish. It's tortilla, but it's kind of like a hard tortilla.
Como una grande.
Exactly, and it typically has cabbage, which is col, queso, typically has some kind of meat. Oftentimes it has a meat here called tasajo, which is kind of like a thin slice of beef. Exactly. Now, another really important thing you need to know how to say here is quiero un mezcal, por favor. Quiero un mezcal, por favor. Mezcal is like a smokier version of tequila.
Hay muchos tipos de mezcales. Muchísimos.
Sí, especialmente en Oaxaca. Next one, if you can't handle spice, tell people sin picante, por favor.
Sin.
Sin picante, por favor. No spice, please. And then, when you want to ask for the bill, all you'll say is la cuenta, por favor. La cuenta, por favor. Okay, so now let's take a look at some things that you might specifically hear in Oaxaca. So first one is tequio. So tequio is this idea of a community service act. In fact, one of Yasmin's friends was hosting some people here in Oaxaca, and they were doing a tequillo, which is basically they were just doing community work and helping out the local people here. Supposedly this is kind of being lost as time goes on, but this is a thing that's common here in Oaxaca. A similar thing is guelaguetza, which is like a tequillo, but it's just traditional way of helping each other, not necessarily a specific project. Next one that's really important is the phrase provecho, which just means enjoy your meal. It's very normal that when you order food in Mexico and your waiter hands it to you, they will say provecho. And it's also very normal that when you leave the restaurant, you say it to other people who are dining there. So you would just say provecho, enjoy your meal.
Otras dos palabras para aprender muy importantes son chapulines y cecina enchilada.
Exacto. Chapulines are grasshoppers. They're super common in Mexico and very, very popular here in Oaxaca. A lot of people are a little bit scared to try them, but I highly recommend you try them. They're not bad. To me, they taste pretty earthy.
It's like crujiente. Es crujiente.
Yeah, they're crunchy. And typically, when you put some lime and chile on them, pretty good.
Yeah, es bueno con... Si estás comiendo un taco y traes la tortilla y otra cosa ahí, es bueno que le pongas 1 o 2 chapulines y no te van a saber mal, vas a ver todo bien. El mix de los sabores creo que va a ser muy recomendable.
Yeah, it's really good.
Pero si no, está bien.
Yeah. Next is cecina enchilada, which is basically like a marinated kind of pork here that's popular. Another thing you should know about is mole. So mole is a big thing here in Oaxaca. It's very important. I highly recommend you try it. Mole is a very sophisticated sauce. It has coffee, different kinds of fruits.
Chocolate.
Exactly. And there's different kinds of mole. There's mole negro, which is kind of the classic one here in Oaxaca, but there's also different kinds like mole amarillo, which would be a yellow mole. But mole negro is definitely the one you should try. So an interesting thing about Oaxaca, a lot of native people from Oaxaca speak Zapoteco. Zapoteco, which is a dialect here in Mexico. In fact, there are more than 67 dialects here in Mexico, Zapoteco being one of them. Now, the word for tortilla in Zapoteco, according to my list, is shuba. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but shuba would be tortilla. Now, here's a funny story for you guys. One time, Yasmin and I were at a taco stand, and I overheard this guy speaking what I thought to be Zapoteco, but then he would kind of throw in Spanish words. And when I realized that he was speaking Sapoñol, just like Spanglish, but with Zapoteco and Spanish. Next we have the word bupu, which is also Zapoteco. Do you know what this is?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
I didn't know a lot of Zapoteco.
It's a traditional foamy drink made from cacao from the Isthmus region. So if you're from Oaxaca and you know more about bupu, I'd love to know about it. I've never tried it. Next is the phrase ahorita vengo.
Eso puede ser muy confuso para ustedes. Es como ya vengo y se va. ¿Cómo?
Okay, so ahorita in Spanish, especially here in Mexico, basically means like in a little bit. You would think that ahorita means right now. However, most times it means like in a bit. So when someone tells you ahorita vengo, that means like, okay, I'll be right back. Ahorita vengo.
En unos minutos.
Exactly. Next, another thing you can say here in Oaxaca is no hay falla, which would be like no problem. No hay falla. Okay, and the last phrase for you that you can use here is está padre. Está padre, which is very Mexican. That basically means it's cool. Está padre, it's cool. You can also use the word chido. Chido. Kind of like you're saying Cheeto, like the snack, but chido with a D. Chido. Cool. Anyways, Oaxaca is beautiful. I highly recommend you check it out. And if you're coming here on vacation, have a great time. Hope you've learned something new in this video. Y esperemos que tengas muy buen día.
Sí, nos vemos pronto.
Hasta luego.